April 1944. The fields of Normandy are quiet, but the silence is heavy, broken only by the distant rumble of engines and the nervous breath of men pressed low in the hedgerows. Dawn's first light glimmers on dew-soaked grass, painting the world in cold silver. In the shadow of a battered farmhouse, a small Allied patrol waits, hearts pounding, eyes fixed on the horizon. Suddenly, the ground trembles. A Tiger tank, its iron hull streaked with mud and battle scars, emerges from the mist. Its turret swings, searching for prey. The men freeze, knowing that their rifles and grenades are useless against such a beast. The Tiger is a legend, unstoppable, invincible, a machine that has turned the tide of battle time and again. But one soldier, crouched behind a broken wall, holds something unexpected. Not a rocket launcher, not a satchel charge, just a length of wire twisted into a simple loop. His hands are steady, his mind racing. He knows the Tiger's power, but he also knows its weakness. In this moment, with nothing but courage and a scrap of metal, he prepares to challenge the monster. The tank draws closer, its engine growling. The soldier waits, every sense alive. The fate of his comrades, and perhaps the battle itself, hangs on a single, desperate act of ingenuity. In the early years of World War II, the German Wehrmacht swept across Europe with a new kind of warfare, blitzkrieg. Fast-moving columns of tanks, infantry, and aircraft shattered defenses and overwhelmed armies from Poland to France. But by 1943, the war had changed. The Allies were learning, adapting, and pushing back. The Eastern Front was a cauldron of destruction, and in North Africa and Italy, German forces faced mounting pressure. It was in this crucible that the Tiger tank was born, officially designated the Panzerkampfwagen 6 Tiger Ausf. It was a machine that would become legend. First deployed in late 1942, the Tiger was unlike anything the Allies had seen. Its armor was thick, up to 100 millimeters at the front, impervious to most Allied anti-tank guns. Its main weapon, the 80mm KWK 36L56 gun, was devastatingly accurate and powerful, capable of destroying enemy tanks at ranges where return fire was useless. The Tiger's arrival on the battlefield was a shock. In Tunisia, at Leningrad, and later in Normandy, Allied crews reported their shells bouncing harmlessly off its hull. Infantrymen spoke of the tank with a mixture of awe and terror. The Tiger seemed invincible, a steel predator that could shrug off punishment and deal death with impunity. German propaganda seized on the Tiger's reputation, portraying it as the ultimate weapon. Newsreels showed columns of Tigers rolling through ruined towns, their crews hailed as heroes. The tank's silhouette, broad, angular, and menacing, became a symbol of German might. For the men who faced it, the Tiger was more than a machine. It was a psychological weapon, a force that could break morale before a shot was fired. But the Tiger was not without flaws. It was heavy, over 50 tons, and mechanically complex. Its engine strained under the weight, and breakdowns were common. The tank's wide tracks helped it cross soft ground, but it was slow and unwieldy in tight spaces. Maintenance was a constant struggle, and spare parts were scarce. Still, when the Tiger was operational, it dominated the battlefield. Allied commanders scrambled to find answers. New tactics were devised, new weapons rushed to the front. But for many soldiers, the Tiger remained a nightmare. Stories spread of entire units pinned down by a single tank, of shells ricocheting off its armor, of men forced to watch helplessly as their comrades fell. By 1944, as the Allies prepared for the invasion of Western Europe, the Tiger's legend had only grown. In the hedgerows of Normandy, in the forests of the Ardennes, and on the plains of Eastern Europe, the mere rumor of a Tiger could halt an advance. The tank's reputation was both a reality and a myth rooted in its formidable design, but magnified by fear and uncertainty. Yet, as the war dragged on, the Allies learned that even the most fearsome weapons had weaknesses. The Tiger's size made it a target for aircraft and artillery. Its slow speed and high fuel consumption limited its range. And in the chaos of battle, even a giant could be brought down by a clever mind and a simple tool. The stage was set for a new kind of warfare, one where ingenuity and courage could tip the balance against overwhelming odds. By the spring of 1944, the Allies were preparing for the largest amphibious invasion in history. Operation Overlord would bring thousands of men and machines to the beaches of Normandy. But planners knew that the German armored divisions, especially those equipped with Tigers, posed a grave threat. Intelligence reports warned of Tiger battalions lurking behind the Atlantic Wall, ready to counterattack any breach. For Allied infantry, the prospect was daunting. Standard anti-tank weapons, like the British Piat or the American bazooka, were unreliable against the Tiger's thick frontal armor. Even the famed Sherman tank, the workhorse of the Allied armored forces, was outgunned and outmatched. Crews learned to fear the Tiger's 80mm gun, which could destroy a Sherman at over a mile, while the Sherman's own rounds often failed to penetrate the Tiger's hide at close range. Desperation bred innovation. In workshops and field depots, engineers and soldiers experimented with new tactics and improvised weapons. Sticky bombs, satchel charges, and anti-tank mines were pressed into service. Air support was called in whenever possible, with fighter bombers like the Typhoon and Thunderbolt hunting Tigers from above. But on the ground, face-to-face with the enemy, infantrymen often had to rely on their wits. The hedgerows of Normandy became a proving ground for these improvised tactics. The dense, maze-like bocage offered cover for ambushes, but also limited visibility and maneuverability. Tanks could appear suddenly, their approach masked by the thick greenery. For a patrol caught in the open, a Tiger's arrival could mean annihilation. It was in this environment that small acts of ingenuity made the difference between life and death. Soldiers learned to exploit the Tiger's vulnerabilities, its limited visibility, its reliance on crew coordination, and its susceptibility to mechanical failure. They watched for moments when the tank was isolated, when its supporting infantry had fallen behind, or when it was forced to reverse or turn in tight quarters. One such moment would become legend. In the chaos of a Normandy skirmish, an Allied soldier, his name lost to history, but his actions preserved in after-action reports, spotted a Tiger tank advancing on his position. With no heavy weapons at hand, he reached for what he had, a length of wire scavenged from a wrecked vehicle. In a flash of inspiration, he fashioned a simple loop and set a trap in the tank's path. The wire loop was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a tool of deception designed to exploit the Tiger's greatest weakness, its dependence on vision and communication. By targeting the tank's vulnerable running gear or periscopes, the wire could disable or blind the beast, buying precious seconds for an attack or escape. This act was not unique. Across the front, soldiers improvised with whatever they could find: ropes, wires, even farm tools, turning the landscape itself into a weapon. These small, desperate measures were rarely recorded in official histories, but they were whispered among the ranks, passed from one unit to another as hard-won lessons. The story of the wire loop is a testament to the power of human ingenuity under fire. It is a reminder that, in war, the simplest ideas can have the greatest impact. As the Allies pressed deeper into France, these acts of battlefield genius would become part of the fabric of victory, proof that even the mightiest machines could be outsmarted by a determined mind and a steady hand. The stage was set for a confrontation that would pit steel against cunning and brute force against the quiet power of invention. In the chaos of battle, survival often depends on the ability to adapt. For the Allied soldier facing the Tiger tank, the odds were overwhelming. The Tiger was a monster, its armor impervious, its gun lethal, its presence enough to freeze men in their tracks. Yet, in these moments of terror, the human mind became the most powerful weapon. The soldier who fashioned the wire loop was not a trained engineer or a decorated officer. He was an ordinary infantryman, shaped by months of hardship and loss. He had seen friends fall to the tiger's guns, had watched shells bounce off its hull, and had felt the helplessness that came with facing an unbeatable foe. But he refused to surrender to fear. His act was born of necessity. With no anti-tank weapons at hand, he looked to his surroundings, scavenging, improvising, thinking beyond the standard playbook. The wire loop was a simple device, but it required courage to use. Setting the trap meant crawling dangerously close to the tank's path, risking discovery and certain death. It meant trusting in a plan that, on paper, seemed almost absurd. Yet, this was the essence of battlefield genius: the ability to see possibility where others saw only doom. The soldier's actions were not just a technical solution, they were a statement of defiance, a refusal to be cowed by the enemy's might. In that moment, he became more than a survivor. He became a symbol of the quiet, relentless ingenuity that would help turn the tide of war. The Tiger tank was designed to dominate. Its thick armor could shrug off most Allied shells, and its 80 mm gun could destroy enemy tanks at extreme range. On open ground, it was nearly invincible, a fortress on tracks. German commanders deployed Tigers as spearheads, using their firepower to break through enemy lines and sow panic among defenders. But the Tiger's strengths were also its weaknesses. Its size and weight made it slow and unwieldy, especially in the tight confines of the Normandy bocage. The tank's complex machinery was prone to breakdowns, and its fuel consumption was prodigious. Most critically, the Tiger relied on its crew's ability to see and communicate. Its vision was limited to narrow periscopes and viewports, and its turret traversed slowly, making it vulnerable to flanking attacks. Allied soldiers learned to exploit these vulnerabilities. They targeted the Tiger's tracks and running gear. Knowing that an immobilized tank was a sitting duck, they used smoke, noise, and deception to confuse the crew and force mistakes. The wire loop was a natural extension of these tactics, a way to disable or blind the Tiger without direct confrontation. In the hands of a resourceful soldier, even the simplest tool could become a weapon. The wire loop was not a miracle solution, but it was a reminder that no machine, however powerful, was invulnerable. Tactics, not just technology, would decide the outcome of the battle. The Tiger tank represented the pinnacle of German engineering, an expensive, complex machine built for a war of attrition. Each Tiger required thousands of man-hours to produce, and its maintenance demanded skilled mechanics and a steady supply of parts. The tank's systems were advanced for their time, but they were also fragile, susceptible to the mud, dust, and chaos of the battlefield. Against this backdrop, the wire loop was almost laughably simple. A length of scavenged wire, twisted into a loop, could be set in the path of a tank or attached to vulnerable components. If caught in the running gear, it could jam the tracks or damage the suspension. If placed over a periscope or vision slit, it could obscure the crew's view, forcing them to open hatches and expose themselves to small arms fire. This contrast between the complexity of the Tiger and the simplicity of the wire loop was emblematic of the broader struggle between high technology and field improvisation. The Germans invested in machines. The Allies invested in adaptability. In the end, it was often the simplest solutions that proved most effective. The wire loop was not a weapon of mass destruction, but it was a tool of disruption, a way to level the playing field and remind the enemy that ingenuity could not be armored against. For the German crew inside the Tiger, the battlefield was a world of steel and shadows. Visibility was limited to narrow slits and periscopes, each one a lifeline to the outside world. The crew relied on discipline and coordination, trusting in their armor and firepower to keep them safe. But every mission carried risk. The Tiger's reputation was a double-edged sword. While it inspired fear in the enemy, it also made the tank a prime target for every Allied weapon and tactic. Reports from German tankers reveal a constant tension. They knew the Allies were desperate to stop them, and that every hedgerow, every ruined village, could conceal a threat. Mines, sticky bombs, and anti-tank guns were dangers they expected. But the wire loop was different. It was invisible, silent, and insidious. A simple length of wire, if caught in the running gear or vision devices, could immobilize the tank or blind the crew at the worst possible moment. The psychological impact was profound. The Tiger's aura of invincibility depended on its ability to move and see. When that was taken away by something as humble as a wire, the crew was left vulnerable, forced to abandon their machine or fight blind. The knowledge that the enemy could improvise such traps added a new layer of anxiety to every mission. The Tiger was still a beast, but it was no longer untouchable. The leadership angle, command decisions, and battlefield adaptation. On both sides of the front, leadership was tested by the Tiger's presence. For German commanders, the Tiger was a precious asset, deployed carefully and often held in reserve for decisive moments. Orders emphasized the need to protect these tanks from ambush and mechanical failure. Crews were trained to be vigilant, to watch for signs of enemy activity, and to avoid isolated positions where they could be surrounded or trapped. Allied leaders, meanwhile, faced the challenge of countering a weapon for which they had no easy answer. Official doctrine evolved rapidly. Infantry were trained to work in teams, using distraction and deception to get close to enemy armor. Reports of improvised tactics, like the wire loop, were collected and circulated, encouraging soldiers to think creatively and share their successes. Commanders rewarded initiative, knowing that the ability to adapt on the fly could mean the difference between victory and defeat. The wire loop became a symbol of this new approach. It was not a standard-issue weapon, but a field innovation, one that reflected the shifting nature of warfare. Leaders on both sides learned that flexibility and quick thinking were as important as firepower and armor. The moral-psychological angle, innovation and the will to resist war, is not just a contest of machines and men, but of wills. The Tiger tank was designed to break the enemy's spirit, to make resistance seem futile. But the wire loop, and the ingenuity it represented, was a quiet act of defiance. It showed that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human mind could find a way to fight back. For Allied soldiers, stories of successful improvisation spread quickly. They became part of the unit's lore, boosting morale and encouraging others to look for unconventional solutions. The knowledge that a simple wire could stop a Tiger was empowering, a reminder that the enemy was not invincible, and that every man could make a difference. For the Germans, the realization that their most feared weapon could be outsmarted was sobering. It forced a reevaluation of tactics and a recognition that technological superiority was not enough. The psychological balance shifted, if only slightly, as the myth of the Tiger was chipped away by acts of courage and creativity. In the end, the wire loop was more than a tool. It was a symbol of the enduring power of human ingenuity, and a testament to the belief that no challenge is insurmountable. The stage was set for the moment when this simple device would be put to the ultimate test, and the fate of a Tiger tank and the men around it would hang in the balance. The morning air was thick with anticipation. In the hedgerows of Normandy, every sound was amplified: the distant crackle of gunfire, the low drone of engines, the nervous whispers of men waiting for the enemy to appear. The Tiger tank, its engine growling, crept forward along a narrow farm track, its massive turret scanning the fields for threats. The ground trembled beneath its weight, and the sun glinted off its angular armor. Hidden in the shadows, the Allied patrol watched, They had no anti-tank guns, no air support, and no hope of reinforcement. The tiger was hunting them, and they knew it. Every man understood the stakes. If the tank reached their position, there would be no escape. One soldier, his uniform caked with mud, moved with quiet purpose. He had seen the tiger's approach, had watched its slow, deliberate advance. In his hand, he clutched a length of wire, salvaged from a wrecked vehicle, twisted into a loop. It was a desperate plan, born of necessity and a flash of inspiration. As the tiger drew closer, the soldier crawled through the tall grass, keeping low, every movement calculated and silent. The tank's crew, focused on the road ahead, did not see him. He reached the edge of the track, heart pounding, and waited for the right moment. The tiger's tracks rolled past, inches away. The soldier sprang into action, looping the wire around a vulnerable section of the running gear, an exposed sprocket, a tensioning wheel, a place where even a small obstruction could cause havoc. He pulled the wire tight, anchoring it to a fence post, and slipped back into the undergrowth. Seconds later, the trap was sprung. The tiger lurched, its track grinding against the wire. The engine strained, gears clashing. The tank shuddered, slowed, and then stopped. Inside, the crew scrambled to understand what had happened. The driver revved the engine, but the track was jammed. The commander peered through his periscope, searching for the source of the problem, but saw only empty fields and waving grass. The Allied patrol seized the moment. Small arms fire rattled against the tiger's hull, forcing the crew to button up. A well-placed grenade landed on the engine deck, sending smoke billowing into the sky. The tank was immobilized, its crew trapped and disoriented. For a few tense minutes, the outcome hung in the balance. The tiger's gun roared, sending shells into the hedgerows, but its field of fire was limited. The crew tried to repair the damage, but the wire was tangled deep in the running gear, impossible to reach from inside. Panic set in as the realization dawned. The tiger, for all its power, was helpless. The Allied soldier watched from cover, breathless. His simple wire loop had done what heavy weapons could not. The monster was stopped, but the battle was not over. The immobilized tiger was still dangerous, and the enemy would not give up easily. The next moments would decide the fate of the tank and the men who had dared to challenge it. Smoke curled from the tiger's engine deck, drifting across the hedgerow like a warning. Inside the tank, the German crew worked frantically. The driver tried to reverse, but the track was locked tight. The gunners scanned for targets, but the periscopes were fogged with smoke and dust. The commander barked orders, his voice tense, as he weighed the risk of opening the hatch against the certainty of being trapped. Outside, the Allied patrol pressed their advantage. They moved quickly, using the cover of the hedgerows to close in. Grenades arced through the air, landing with dull thuds on the tiger's hull. Rifle fire pinged off the armor, a constant reminder that the tank was now prey, not predator. The immobilized tiger, once the terror of the battlefield, was reduced to a steel bunker, powerful, but blind and vulnerable. The German crew faced a grim choice. To stay inside was to risk fire and suffocation. To emerge was to face capture or death. The commander hesitated, then made his decision. One by one, the hatches opened. Smoke and heat poured out as the crew scrambled onto the hull, hands raised in surrender. The Allied soldiers rushed forward, weapons ready, but the fight was over. The tiger was theirs. The silence that followed was heavy with disbelief. The patrol gathered around the captured tank, staring at the tangled wire loop that had brought down the beast. Some laughed, the tension breaking at last. Others simply shook their heads, marveling at the simplicity of the solution. The soldier who had set the trap was silent, his hands still trembling from the adrenaline. He had faced the tiger and won, not with firepower, but with ingenuity. Word of the incident spread quickly. Other units heard the story, passing it along the line with a mixture of awe and skepticism. Could a simple wire really stop a tiger? The evidence was there, plain to see. A 50-ton tank immobilized by a scrap of metal and a moment of inspiration. For the Germans, the loss was a blow. The Tiger's reputation had been its greatest weapon, and now that myth was shattered. Reports from the front noted a new caution among tank crews. They checked their tracks more carefully, watched for signs of sabotage, and grew wary of the unseen threats lurking in the fields and hedgerows. For the Allies, the victory was more than tactical. It was a psychological turning point, a reminder that no enemy, no matter how formidable, was invincible. The wire loop became a symbol of hope, a story told around campfires and in briefing tents, inspiring others to look for unconventional solutions. The battlefield was littered with the wreckage of war, but amid the destruction, a new kind of courage had emerged. The defeat of the Tiger was not just a triumph of arms, but a victory of the human spirit, a testament to the power of ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds. As the patrol moved on, leaving the captured tank behind, the lesson lingered. Sometimes, the simplest ideas can change the course of battle. The story of the wire loop and the immobilized Tiger tank did not remain confined to a single hedgerow in Normandy. Within days, word traveled through the ranks, first as a rumor, then as a confirmed report. Officers and enlisted men alike were eager for any method that could level the playing field against German armor. The tale was recounted in mess tents, scribbled in letters home, and quietly noted in after-action reports. Commanders took notice. In briefings, the incident was dissected and discussed. The wire loop was not a standard-issue weapon, but its effectiveness was undeniable. Field manuals began to include references to improvised anti-tank measures, encouraging soldiers to use whatever resources were at hand. Training sessions incorporated lessons on tank vulnerabilities, emphasizing the importance of creativity and quick thinking. The tactic itself evolved. Soldiers experimented with different materials, cable, rope, even barbed wire, seeking the most reliable way to jam a tank's running gear or obscure its vision. Some units developed more elaborate traps, combining wire with mines or explosives to increase the odds of success. Others focused on stealth, perfecting the art of setting a snare under the cover of darkness or during the confusion of battle. The psychological impact was just as significant. The myth of the Tiger's invincibility had been punctured. Allied troops, once paralyzed by fear at the sight of the German behemoth, now saw a glimmer of hope. They understood that the Tiger, for all its power, was not immune to the ingenuity of a determined opponent. Morale improved, and with it, the willingness to take risks and seize opportunities. For the Germans, the incident was a warning. Tank crews became more cautious, checking their vehicles for sabotage before every mission. Maintenance routines grew more rigorous, and commanders issued new orders to avoid isolated positions where ambushes were likely. The Tiger was still a formidable weapon, but its aura of invulnerability had been diminished. The wire loop tactic did not end the reign of the Tiger overnight. Many tanks continued to dominate the battlefield, and countless Allied soldiers paid a heavy price in the fight against German armor. But the balance had shifted, if only slightly. The knowledge that a simple, improvised device could bring down a giant changed the way both sides approached the contest. In the months that followed, as the Allies pushed deeper into France and beyond, the lessons of Normandy echoed across the front. Every soldier who faced a Tiger carried with him the memory of that day, a reminder that courage and creativity could tip the scales. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, the battlefield was still a place of danger and uncertainty. But now, there was also the quiet confidence that no enemy was truly unbeatable. As the summer of 1944 gave way to autumn, the Allied advance across France accelerated. The wire loop incident became one of many examples cited in official reports and debriefings, illustrating the growing importance of field improvisation in modern warfare. Intelligence officers compiled data on Tiger tank losses, noting a subtle but significant trend. While mechanical failure and air attacks remained the leading causes of Tiger casualties, a rising number of tanks were being disabled by unconventional means, ambushes, sabotage, and improvised traps. After-action reports from the Normandy campaign documented dozens of cases where Allied soldiers had used wire, rope, or even discarded equipment to jam tracks or damage running gear. In some instances, these tactics allowed infantry to close in and finish the job with grenades or satchel charges. In others, the mere threat of such traps forced German tank crews to slow their advance, check their surroundings, and operate with greater caution. The cumulative effect was a reduction in the Tiger's battlefield tempo and a growing sense of vulnerability among its crews. Statistical analysis from the British and American armies revealed that, by late 1944, the average operational lifespan of a Tiger tank in frontline service had dropped dramatically, from several weeks in 1943 to just a few days in the chaos of the Normandy bocage. While air power and artillery played the largest roles, the contribution of ground-level innovation was increasingly recognized. Field commanders praised the initiative of soldiers who refused to be cowed by the enemy's technological superiority. The broader shift in anti-tank warfare was unmistakable. The Allies continued to develop new weapons, more powerful bazookas, shaped charge grenades, and specialized tank destroyers, but the lessons of the wire loop endured. Training programs emphasized adaptability, encouraging troops to observe, experiment, and share successful tactics. The concept of fighting smart became a core principle, shaping the doctrine of combined arms and small unit tactics for the remainder of the war. For the German High Command, the implications were sobering. The Tiger, once a symbol of invincibility, was now a target for every form of ingenuity the Allies could muster. Maintenance and recovery units were stretched thin, struggling to keep the heavy tanks operational in the face of constant threats. Morale among tank crews suffered, as the fear of unseen dangers, mines, traps, and sabotage became a daily reality. In the post-war years, military historians and analysts would look back on the Normandy campaign as a turning point, not just in the defeat of German armor, but in the evolution of battlefield thinking. The wire loop, humble and improvised, stood as a testament to the power of adaptation in war. It was a reminder that technology alone could not guarantee victory, and that the human mind, when pressed to the limit, could find solutions where none seemed possible. The legacy of the wire loop lived on, not only in the stories of those who witnessed its success, but in the doctrine and training of armies around the world. It became a symbol of the enduring truth that, in the crucible of combat, innovation is often the greatest weapon of all. In the long shadow of war, the story of a wire loop and a Tiger tank endures as more than a battlefield anecdote. It is a quiet testament to the resilience and creativity of the human spirit under fire. When faced with overwhelming force, it was not always the biggest gun or the thickest armor that decided the outcome, but the willingness to adapt, to improvise, and to risk everything on a single inspired idea. The Tiger tank was designed to dominate through fear and firepower. Its legend was built on the promise of invincibility. Yet, in the mud and hedgerows of Normandy, that legend was undone not by superior technology, but by a moment of clarity. A soldier's recognition that even the mightiest machine has a weakness, and that sometimes the simplest tool can become the sharpest blade. This lesson echoes far beyond the fields of France. It speaks to every generation that faces impossible odds, reminding us that ingenuity is the birthright of those who refuse to surrender. The wire loop, twisted by a steady hand in the dawn light, became a symbol of hope, a reminder that courage and imagination can tip the balance, even when the world seems lost to steel and fire. History remembers the great machines and the men who built them, but it is shaped, in the end, by those who dare to think differently, who see possibility where others see only defeat. In the story of the wire loop and the Tiger tank, we find not just a victory of arms, but a triumph of the human mind.